This is incompetence, Speaker. There is no other way to describe it. People are paying the price for this incompetence. My question to this Premier is, why is her minister not paying the price for his incompetence?
Minister of Natural Resources, come to order.
Again, Mr. Speaker, I will once again just read into the record some of the comments that were made about the introduction of smart meters by people who actually know what's going on, Mr. Speaker, and are actually seeing. And there's no doubt, Mr. Speaker, that there have been increases in the cost of electricity, as there have been in jurisdictions all over North America.
I'm Rebecca Thompson in for Adrian Batra. Well, earlier this week, Ontario's Auditor General, Bonnie Lysyk, issued a scathing report just to identify what's going on with a number of programs in Ontario, in the Ontario government, and she identified the fact that there is not value for money for some of these programs. Well, she was met with an interesting response from Ontario's Energy Minister, who questioned her findings. Joining me now is Bonnie Lysyk. Thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I want to start with the smart meter program. We just heard the Premier, Kathleen Wynne, identify the fact that there's more. The electricity system is more complex than the average person should know about. So, what do you get the sense of in terms of your staff, how much work you put in, your understanding of the smart meter program, of Ontario's electricity system, and how you went about getting to these numbers and who approved them?
Yeah, you know, at the end of the day, Ontario does have a complex system because of the fact that everything is quite decentralized. You know, there's 73 distribution companies in Ontario. But in terms of us understanding the industry and the audit, my team is very experienced in doing energy audits. A number of them have been done in the office. I myself am familiar with the electricity industry. I worked 10 years in the industry. And we also, on this particular audit on smart meters, we brought in a specialist in smart meters to help us understand it. So at the end of the day, I do think we knew the subject matter and we're well equipped. We also make sure that we're accurate with our reporting, and so our reports are vetted by our auditees. And so in this case, the Ontario Energy Board reviewed the report, the IESO reviewed it, Hydro One reviewed it, and the Ministry reviewed it. On the final review with the Ministry, they did question, we have $400 million in there on the disposal of analog meters and the replacement of them with smart meters. And they questioned the value that we had there. We went back and forth a bit. We're confident we have a really good number in there. And so I support the report and I support the accuracy of that. We did reach agreement on the report. There is comments in our report from the Ministry, from OEB, Energy Board, and IESO agreeing with the report. So, I'm comfortable that at the end of the day we got it right.
So if you had all of these third parties who were agreeing with your report prior to it being released earlier this week, how do you explain the Energy Minister's response that your report facts are inaccurate and the conclusions are premature?
I met with the Minister last week and we had a good discussion. I did not get the sense that there would be this significant of an issue on the report. My only response would be that I do believe our numbers are accurate. Even if we took into account the meter issue that's been discussed there are costs that we did not include in the $1.9 billion. For instance, the cost of putting in place the data center for metering information, I believe we have a number in there of about $160 million. At the end of the day, if you take that, the costs that are going to be incurred with that system, they'll be around $320 million, so it's at least double. So that even offsets the discussion around the meters. So, I'm very comfortable with the number that we've put out, around $1.9 billion on the costs. The other side of that is we always look to people that we're working with, the auditees, to see whether they've done that exercise, because that's the whole point of this. We were commenting that, first of all, there wasn't a plan that was put in place, a cost-benefit analysis when the decision was made to implement smart meters. When one was actually done, it was faulty. faulty. It didn't contain the right figures. So at the end of the day, the benefits from smart meters were overestimated. And then what we found is during the course of the implementation of smart meters, there wasn't any reviewing of plans, there wasn't any revisiting numbers, there wasn't tracking of the costs overall. And so that's why my audit team put together that schedule that came to $1.9 billion, because we want to know what it would cost so we could share that with the legislators and the public.
And do you get the sense that the government is going to listen to or react to any part of your report when it comes to the smart meter program, or because of the minister's response and also the premier's response, but that there was this professional disagreement as she described it, do you get the sense that they're just going to remain silent from here on in?
You know, I do think there is agreement with what's in that report. I truly do. I do think that they take the work of our office seriously, and I do think that the recommendations we have in there will be considered and addressed, especially the planning one. I mean, I think the movement or the implementation of smart meters, as people have been talking, is a step toward what's called the smart grid. So what we're encouraging is that if that is the movement, the intent is to make the electricity grid more functioning, more able to detect outages throughout the system, that they just need to put in place some cost-benefit analysis to make sure they know where they're going in the development, to make sure that there aren't overruns in the costs. So, by saying that smart meter hasn't provided value to date, we're not saying that there isn't an opportunity for something in the future. We're just saying at this point in time, it hasn't shown value for money.
Okay, well, we're going to continue after the break and talk a little bit more about the $50 billion more that Ontarians are paying for electricity that you pointed out in your report on Monday. We'll be back after the break. Well, we're joined by Ontario's Auditor General, Bonnie Lysyk, who offered a very scathing report of the Ontario government's value for money when it comes to a number of programs, including their controversial smart meter program, and of course the price of electricity in Ontario, which some have said and coined at the highest in North America. Now, before the break, we were talking about your report on smart meter, and part of your comments were the fact that the Ontario government, through what was called a global adjustment, instituted this rate that is going to be $50 billion more for the people of Ontario than if they allowed us to pay the actual market rate. And the Energy Minister responded by saying that has absolutely nothing to do with the smart meter program. What's your response? $50 million is being billed through the time of use rates, which are integral to smart metering. Smart meters were put in there so that people could also gauge and control their time, so during on-peak, off-peak, mid-peak. And so 70% of the time of use rates is attributable to the global adjustment. The global adjustment is really, the majority of it is the difference between market price of electricity and the contracts that are in place with generators. So it is a huge portion. The TOU rates have been impacted by the global adjustment. Global adjustment has gone up 1,200%, while electricity, the market price has gone down 46%. So you can see that mix has shifted in the TOU price because of the global adjustment being there. One point on this is that in 2011, the Auditor General at the time, Jim McCarter, issued also a very scathing report on the status of the green energy program and policy and legislation that the Ontario government had introduced, and this, speculating that the price of electricity was going to skyrocket if they didn't do something about some of the issues at that time, which at that time and since the Ontario government has tried to fix some of these issues. But as you point out with smart meter and your comments on Monday, in fact, the price of electricity will continue to rise.
Yes, because Ontario is in a surplus situation. So when you have to sell electricity at market price into, let's say, the United States, it's still costing beyond that to generate the electricity. And so therefore, and largely because they're renewables, therefore that difference is passed on to the ratepayers in Ontario.
And there's many parts to your report, of course, that were very shocking. One of them is the unfunded liabilities of pension plans. So those who retire, who are locked in with these very expensive pensions, $75 billion shortfall is what you claimed in your report, where the Ontario government is on the hook for $75 billion. And where is that money? How is this program, and how is this being considered by the Ontario government? What were your findings there?
Well, we basically looked. Our audit focused on the Financial Services Commission of Ontario, Fisco, and we wanted to see how well they were regulating the pension industry in terms of keeping on top of what the unfunded liabilities were in all the pension plans in Ontario. And so our figure there about an unfunded liability going up from 22 billion to 75 is all the pension plans in Ontario. And we think that the monitoring of those pension plans could be a little bit stronger. We compared the way Fisco in Ontario monitors the pension plans compared to how OSFI, which is the federal regulator, monitors pension plans in their peer review. And we found that the federal monitor, OSFI, does a lot more in terms of working with the pension plans and the employers of those pension plans to ensure that things are looked at before there's problems with those pension plans.
Should people be worried about the fact that there's this enormous shortfall?
Well, I think at the end of the day, what it says is, if those pension plans were to fold up, the monies wouldn't be there to pay to pensioners. So that's why we think it's an area of concern, and we think some attention should be paid to try and really distill beyond the market situation some of the reasons why certain higher risk pension plans have larger liabilities than others.
Okay, well, we're going to take a quick break, but we're going to continue to dissect your report, which of course found that there is a loss of value for money when it comes to the Ontario government and a number of the government's programs. We'll be back after the break. Well, we're here with Ontario's Auditor General, Bonnie Lysyk, who earlier this week released a report covering a number of issues and problems that the Ontario government has not followed through on in terms of providing value for money. Now, one area that I want to talk about is the water source protection program. The Ontario Premier Kathleen Wynne in the election earlier this year was very scathing and critical towards the Ontario Progressive Conservatives for not following through on proper water protection, which of course led to what we know as the Walkerton tragedy, resulting in some fatal deaths of individuals because of this water protection. In your report, you've identified the fact that the Ontario government hasn't also followed through on a proper water protection program.
Yes, we did an audit of the source water protection, and you're right in that 14 years later, after that incident, some of the protection plans are not in place. So there was identified a need for about 19 source water protection plans in Ontario. At the time we were doing the audit, there were 3 that had been approved, and I believe now there's about 8 or 9 that have been approved. Our comment was that it's important that those get approved and get implemented. It's not just approval. At the end of the day, there still is a need to implement those plans. It's much cheaper to protect source water than it is to treat water from contamination later.
Was it hypocritical of the government to make this accusation when they haven't been able to follow through properly?
To be honest, I didn't hear any of that discussion if it was during the election time. So we had started this audit, it would have been last fall. So this was under our own agenda to do as a result of a concern we had about whether or not those plans were in place.
And in terms of the question period fallout since your report over the past couple of days, it has been extremely heated in question period, where we have both opposition parties who are putting the Energy Minister and also the Premier on the spot to respond to their response to your report, including the Ontario NDP leader Andrea Horwath, even going as far as saying that that their interpretation of your report was sexist by saying that that the electricity system is too complex. What do you make of this comment?
I didn't even think too much about it. I mean, once we finish these types of this report, we're well on the way to doing other audits. So, in my experience as an auditor, there's a lot of situations you encounter where, there's different reasons for things to be said and things to be done. I think the thing for our office is just to keep focused on the work. Remember that we're working for all members of the Legislative Assembly, keep our work professional, objective, to the point, and just carry on. So. And
how many years did you work at Manitoba Hydro?
Oh, I was there for 10 years. 10 years.
And just again, who signed off on your report again prior to you releasing it on Monday?
We had vetted it by the Ontario Energy Board, by the IESO, by Hydro One, as well as the Ministry. And so we include in our report commentary from the auditees, and we have their commentary incorporated. And yeah, there was no mention of any disagreement in their commentaries.
That's great. Well, this is an interesting example because of all of the years that I've covered these type of reports. I have never seen the kind of response coming out of the Ontario government, or any government for that matter, in terms of reacting to an Auditor General's report. There's no doubt that you have a very competent team, and you yourself, of course, have been part of Manitoba Hydro in the past, so you clearly understand the electricity system, if it's Manitoba or if it's Ontario, and the Ontario government, of course, is going to have to respond to the recommendations that you made when it comes to not only electricity but also the water source protection program, immigration, pension, unfunded liabilities, among others. Last word to you. We don't have much time left, but what would be your parting words for what the government should take away from this experience this week?
We're working on behalf of all members of the Legislative Assembly. So, people are free to comment. I think what I see is a positive going forward. I know that when we cleared our report and all our chapters, that there was acceptance of the report, the recommendations. So I do feel, as a representative of my office and for my staff, that what we do in our office is important on behalf of the citizens of the province and the members, and that I think at the end of the day, these will be implemented and changes. I should one more thing mention, while we're underway with our audits, things are already happening. So we are an impetus for change and improvement in the public sector.
Bonnie Lysyk, Auditor General of Ontario, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you very much.